Brought to you by the Minority Media Association and the Broadcasting Club at UWM, celebrating diversity in your area.
Bringing my community to you.
Identifying issues that are important to everyone. Embracing individuality.
Welcome to the U-View.
Hello and welcome to the U-View, presented by the Minority Media Association at UWM and the Broadcast Club at UWM. I'm your host, David Rangel of the MMA.
And I'm Norma Ortiz of the MMA. On last week's show, we got a history lesson in African American journalism in Milwaukee. This week, we're going to examine lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, or LGBT, media in Milwaukee.
Our first guests are Special Collections librarian here at UWM and the Zine Queen of Milwaukee. But he's more than just a bookworm. Max Yela has designed and installed over a dozen art exhibitions here on campus that highlight various themes in books and print. Jessica Bublitz is the originator of the Milwaukee Zinefest.
An expert in written media, Max Yela hosts over 100 lectures and workshops a year that teach people about classic and cultural literature. One of those workshops is focused on zines in Milwaukee's annual Zinefest. Max Yela joins us today to tell us about the American zine movement and the history of the LGBT zines. Welcome to the U-View, Max.
Thank you very much.
What are zines?
What are zines? Well, that's a big question. Zines are a personal format. They're book-like. They have almost a pamphlet kind of quality about them. Mm-hmm. And one could relate zines to perhaps blogs, right? And if you could think of them as kind of like printed blogs, that might be an interesting way of thinking about or conceptualizing what zines are. They're very personal. They have very personal content. They reveal the interests and ideas of the maker. And it's interesting that a maker would use this format in a digital age. Why is that? I think it's the tactility of the objects themselves, and the fact that we can engage in them in a very personal manner. So it seems to be a personal space for personal content.
Interesting. And what are their roles in the LGBT community?
Well, in the LGBT community, there are a variety of different ways of communication, right? There's personal communication, there's communication through things like Wisconsin Gazette here in Milwaukee. But there are informal ways of communication that are based on media. And since issues in the LGBT community can be very personal, right, as well as public and political, these forms are particularly good forms for the LGBT community to get the word out about different ideas, different thoughts, different perceptions, their feelings about the politics going on in the city and in Milwaukee. And it's not just localized, it's also connected to a larger national scene.
Well, that sounds great, Max. I guess I'm sure what our audience members would like to know, how did you get interested in zines? And tell me about Zinefest after you tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My interest in zines began with my interest in media, generally, and books as media. And I'm interested in a wide range of media, from television to telephones to iPads to books. And the job that I do, my job is to identify and then acquire and then preserve original printed sources. So in my job, I definitely deal with printed sources. But not the information that's contained inside the sources, but the source itself, the object is as information. So in my job, I preserve materials specifically for programs here on campus, printed materials, and I'm preserving the object itself as information, as well as the information that's encoded inside these objects. So that's my professional interest. My personal interest is I'm a media theorist. I'm interested in how individuals use media in a variety of ways, and also how media frames our understanding of the world. And zines have a very particular place in that. For academic purposes, it's really useful to have a wide range of zines in order for us to have like a data set to see what's going on in the world. Why do zines exist at all? I mean, zines really have an origin that goes back to fanzines, right? I mean, we could say it goes back to the beginning of the 20th century, but really the zines as a movement is really begins in the 1970s, the late 1970s. And my interest is in how do these zines as materiality frame our understanding of certain discussions that go on in zines, particularly in the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think zines matter?
Well, they matter because they're a format, right? They're a medium of some sort,
Sure.
and they're very, very personal.
Right.
And it seems almost anachronistic, I suppose, that we would turn to this kind of form in order to communicate very personal ideas. When we use Facebook or Twitter or some other social media in order to convey these very personal and intimate kinds of things that are going on in our lives. And yet zinesters, and that's the term used for those who engage in zines and make zines,
Sure.
zinesters choose this particular format. And for me, as a researcher, I'm interested in why they choose that as a format.
Right.
And what I've discovered is they choose it, and I think this is true, and I think Jessica could speak to this well, is because it sits in your hand. It's an artifact, almost like a body, almost like a person in itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a physical connection between the individual and the object. And in this age of digital communication and digital association, that kind of physical intimacy is lost through digital spaces. Now, digital spaces are great for all kinds of other things, but in that tactility of the zine, we find the instance of communication between the reader and the maker, and that's what I think is going on in zines.
Well, that sounds great. Here's a question for you, Jessica. How are zines an expression of identity?
Well, I mean, in every single way, I guess you could say. I really like the design aspect of it. Some people are more interested in just getting their voice out.
Sure.
And in the same way that you would write a letter to a pen pal, you'd write a zine, you get your emotions out, sometimes even photocopy a diary and send it off to people that maybe you don't know, but you feel like you know because you've read their deep desires and their experiences as well. So you might not even, if you passed them on the street, you might not recognize them, but you feel this connection to them through zines.
Interesting. Okay, well, with that being said, tell me the history of zines.
That's pretty long. I guess, well, you started it pretty well. There's a good chunk of it that started out with fanzines and the science fiction, fan fiction realm. So that was really popular in the 70s and 80s. And then I guess there was a large explosion of it in the 90s based off of punk zines from the 70s and 80s kind of coming together, all these different formats. So there were people that were writing fiction, personal stories, wanted to write about music. So they all kind of came together, and I'm not sure what happened in the 90s that made it work so well, but just it kind of happened. I don't know.
Just on Zinefest.
All right.
Yeah, actually, that's the question I was going to ask next. Let's
well,
talk about that.
I was hired by Max at the UWM Special Collections as a zine outreach person. So I decided that not only was I going to bring zines into the library, but I was going to make programming based on it. And 2008, we started it the first time, and it was at the library. It was really a blast, and we really got the word out about the zine collection there. And the following years, we kind of moved it around a little bit, and it's coming up again in October this year. So we have a lot of tablers or vendors that all sit in the main space and sell their zines and buttons and things like that. But then we also have special guests, videos, all different things going on throughout the day. So there's lots of content based on zines.
And it's both regional and national.
Well, that sounds great. We have a little bit of time left. I guess my next question, how many zines exactly exist in Milwaukee, and what other subcultures are there that deal with zines?
Oh, there must be thousands
Yeah.
of zines.
Really?
Wow. My collection, we're just beginning to catalog the collection at the libraries. And I think we've reached about 400 zines as individual titles.
Really?
Jessica runs a distribution, or has run a distro.
Okay.
Distribution center for zines. And what would you say locally in terms of various distros?
Well, I'm one of the few distros, but there's probably about 20 very productive people in the city, and there's a good amount just within Wisconsin.
Sure.
So there's actually a couple thousand that are waiting to be cataloged, so eventually they'll all get there.
And when it comes to LGBT, there's the QZAP is the main center for distribution of ideas and preservation of queer zines.
Wow, well I have to say, I don't see a lot of these around. Where would you find a lot of these zines?
At the Zinefest, at the library. Those are probably some of the best places.
What about locally for people who want to pick them up just on a weekly basis?
There are very few that are available in stores right now. There are a couple at Fuel and a couple other random places, but we're working on setting up a shop in the Public House, which is a cooperative bar space and community space. So that's like a pop-up shop, so look forward to that in the future.
And I've seen a few at Woodland Pattern Book Center on Locust in Milwaukee. I don't know what the range of collecting is there, but they have at least, I've seen 10 or 20 zine-like objects. So zines are, they're broad. You know, they run from things that are published commercially, sometimes to handwritten things.
Wow. Well, this is all news to me because I've never seen any in a record store, but obviously they seem to be going strong. And let me see if we can get in one last question. Zines are handcrafted, obviously. Now, how has the internet changed that, if at all?
Well, actually last year there was a big debate about the death of zines and the revenge of zines. So people kept saying that zines are dead, they're not happening anymore. And there was a resurgence in the community saying, we're here, it's still happening, we're not going away. So even though you can do things online, and a lot of people are kind of doing both online and offline work, there's just something, like Max was saying, about the handheld quality, the immediacy of it.
Sure.
You know, you can put it in your back pocket and ride your bike across town. So there's just something more personal about having it off of the screen. And
I think that digital spaces kind of feed the need for zines, right? And I think, I believe that because there's digital communication, it kind of refocuses our ideas back on these objects that we just took for granted.
Sure.
And you're right. There was this discussion or this dialogue about the possibility of the disintegration of zine culture, and I think it's the format itself that because it's tactile and because we want to be personal with them, that keeps it alive. And I think we'll always keep it alive. And the same thing can be said for books. Just any printed materials generally, I think are enlivened by the fact that there is digital space, because it's so different from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both, Max and Jessica, for joining us today. And if you want to learn more about zines or other book arts, visit him in Goldmeyer Library, 472A. When we come back, we'll look at more LGBT media with the Wisconsin Gazette. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Boy, it's amazing how many stars there are. You know what's really amazing, Clell, is that recent discoveries within the Orion Nebula lend credence to the theory of a whole other solar system, predating our own, of course. the origins of which remain in microscopic gaseous form, thus increasing the chances of our not being alone. Let's see.
Welcome back to the U-View. Our next guest is the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Wisconsin Gazette, the largest publication in the state's history to target the LGBT community and its allies.
Louis Weisenberg's professional background includes experience in both journalism and marketing. He has also written for some of the nation's top daily newspapers, including the Chicago Tribune and the Boston Globe. As an editor of the Windy City Times in 1990, Louis and his colleagues started the Chicago Free Press, which became the dominant paper in the city's gay media market.
An award-winning writer for his excellent work in gay print, Louis founded the Wisconsin Gazette in 2009. Now, Louis is here to give us a look into the history of LGBT press in Milwaukee. Welcome to the show, Louis.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thank you for being here. I guess the first question I have for you is, why exactly did the Gazette start?
Well, there wasn't currently a, this was in 2009, and the last LGBT paper had gone out of business in January of that year, and we started in November. Around August, we started, meaning me and some people I'd worked with in the past from Chicago, and a funder, a friend of mine who was willing to fund a project like that here, we started talking about how bad it was that there wasn't any LGBT press, and things kind of fell together.
Well, what's the history of LGBT media in Milwaukee in particular?
You know, I came from a different market, so I'm not that familiar with Milwaukee. I know that there's a long-standing tradition of LGBT press here that goes back to the 70s. There was a kind of a gay liberation paper here in the early 70s. I can't remember the name. I think it was called GLU or something. And there had been papers kind of, when one would fold, another one would take over, but there's kind of always been a succession of LGBT press here in the Milwaukee area.
We know that you work for big companies such as the Chicago Tribune and all that, but tell us a little bit more about your bio.
About my bio?
Yes, your biography.
Well, I worked for, I was a stringer for newspapers all over the country. I lived in the Southwest. And then I moved to, one of the publications I worked for was Advertising Age. I was a West Coast correspondent. They're based in Chicago. They're part of Crane Media. And I moved to Chicago to become news editor at Windy City Times. I was interested in getting involved in advocacy press because I'd been doing, I've been doing reporting, but it wasn't about necessarily something I was passionate about or cared about. So I thought this was kind of a great niche press because I am gay and I can kind of, promote LGBT equality and do my job at the same time.
What do you cover that the media ignores?
A lot of things. I think that there was a while when the media was doing, the mainstream media was doing a great job covering LGBT issues. The Associated Press, UPI, Reuters, they all had constant coverage. Some of the larger daily papers all had reporters who had that as part of their beat. But with the kind of crisis that print journalism ran into in general and the cutting back, it was one of those kind of marginal areas where they could cut back. So a lot of the coverage was lost. It migrated to the web, but so much of what's on the web is blogging or opinions or not substantiated, professionally researched stories, sourced stories. So there's a lot now that we're able to cover that would fall through the cracks, literally never get covered at all, especially local LGBT news and local organizational news. And what we do is we try to point out we try to pull the national together with the local. We have a national writer and she's an award-winning journalist for 30 years. She and I are close friends. And she works on the national stories and I work on how they play out locally, what the trends are like locally. And then of course there's also things that are happening locally that aren't happening nationally, and we cover those too. So.
Well, that sounds great, and I'm sorry, unfortunately we are out of time for this weekend's show. I'd like to thank you for being on our show as a special guest, and thanks to all the guests, Max Yela and Jessica Bublitz. And
we also like to give a special thanks to Sean Wiley, Mark Soromsky, and the Broadcast Club for their support and hard work in putting together another great show together.
Thank you.